The Diaries of Samuel Pepys. Read by Kenneth Branagh.
(1666) September the 2nd, Lord's Day. Some of our maids sitting up late last night to get things ready against our feast today. Jane called us up about 3 in the morning to tell us of a great fire they saw in the city. So I rose and slipped on my nightgown and went to her window and thought it to be on the backside of Mark Lane. I thought it far enough off, and so went to bed again and to sleep. About 7, rose again to dress myself, and there looked out at the window and saw the fire not so much as it was, and further off. By and by Jane comes and tells me that she hears that above 300 houses have been burnt down tonight by the fire we saw, and that it was now burning down all Fish Street by London Bridge. So I walked to the tower, and there got up upon one of the high places, Sir John Robinson's little son going up with me, and there I did see the houses at that end of the bridge all on fire, and an infinite great fire on this and the other side, the end of the bridge, which among other people did trouble me for poor little Mitchell and our Sarah on the bridge. So down, with my heart full of trouble, to the lieutenant of the tower, who tells me that it began this morning in the King's baker's house in Pudding Lane, and that it hath burned down St. Magnus Church and most part of Fish Street already. So I down to the waterside, and there got a boat, and through the bridge, and there saw a lamentable fire. Poor Mitchell's house, as far as the Old Swan, already burnt that way, and the fire running further, that in a very little time it got as far as the Still Yard while I was there. Everybody endeavouring to remove their goods, and flinging them into the river, or bringing them into lighters that lay off. And among other things, the poor pigeons, I perceive, were loath to leave their houses, but hovered about the windows and balconies, till they were, some of them, burnt their wings, and fell down. Having stayed, and in an hour's time seen the fire rage every way, and nobody to my sight endeavouring to quench it, and the wind mighty high, and driving it into the city, and everything, after so long a drought, proving combustible, even the very stones of churches, I to Whitehall, and there up to the King's closet in the chapel. And word was carried into the King, so I was called for, and did tell the King and Duke of York what I saw, and that unless his Majesty did command houses to be pulled down, nothing could stop the fire. The King commanded me to go to my Lord Mayor from him, and command him to spare no houses, but to pull down before the fire every way. Here meeting with Captain Cock, I in his coach to Paul's, and there walked along Watling Street as well as I could, every creature coming away loaden with goods to save, and here and there sick people carried away in beds. At last met my Lord Mayor in Canning Street, like a man spent, with a handkerchief about his neck. To the King's message he cried like a fainting woman, "Lord, what can I do? I am spent. People will not obey me. I have been pulling down houses, but the fire overtakes us faster than we can do it." So he left me and I him, and walked home, seeing people all almost distracted, and no manner of means used to quench the fire. The houses, too, so very thick thereabouts, and full of matter for burning, as pitch and tar in Thames Street, and warehouses of oil and wines and brandy and other things. Here I saw Mr. Isaac Houblon, that handsome man, prettily dressed and dirty at his door at Dowgate, receiving some of his brother's things whose houses were on fire, and, as he says, they have been removed twice already, and he doubts, as it soon proved, that they must be in a little time removed from his house also. By this time it was about 12 o'clock, and so home, and there find my guests, which was Mr. Wood and his wife, Barbary Sheldon, and also Mr. Moon. She mighty fine, and her husband, for aught I see, a likely man. We were in great trouble and disturbance at this fire, not knowing what to think of it. However, we had an extraordinary good dinner, and as merry as at this time we could be. As soon as dined, I and Moon away and walked through the city, the streets full of nothing but people and horses and carts loaden with goods, ready to run over one another, they now removing out of Canning Street, which received goods in the morning, into Lombard Street and further. We parted at Paul's, he home and I to Paul's Wharf, where I had appointed a boat to attend me, and took in Mr. Carcass and his brother, whom I met in the street, and carried them below and above bridge, to and again, to see the fire, which was now got further, both below and above, and no likelihood of stopping it. Met with the King and Duke of York in their barge, and with them to Queen Hithe, and there called Sir Richard Browne to them. Their order was only to pull down houses apace, but little was or could be done, the fire coming upon them so fast. Having seen as much as I could now, I away to Whitehall by appointment, and there walked to St. James's Park, and there met my wife, and Creed, and Wood and his wife, and walked to my boat, and there upon the water again, and to the fire up and down, it still increasing, and the wind great. So near the fire as we could for smoke, and all over the Thames, with one's face in the wind, you were almost burned with a shower of fire drops. When we could endure no more upon the water, we to a little alehouse on the bankside over against the Three Cranes, and there stayed till it was dark almost, and saw the fire grow, and as it grew darker appeared more and more, and in corners and upon steeples and between churches and houses, as far as we could see up the hill of the city, in a most horrid, malicious, bloody flame, not like the fine flame of an ordinary fire. We stayed till we saw the fire as only one entire arch of fire from this to the other side of the bridge, and in a bow up the hill, for an arch of above a mile long. It made me weep to see it. The churches, houses, and all on fire and flaming at once, and a horrid noise the flames made, and the cracking of houses at their ruin. So home with a sad heart, and there find everybody discoursing and lamenting the fire. And poor Tom Hayter came with some few of his goods saved out of his house, which is burned upon Fish Street Hill. I invited him to lie at my house, and did receive his goods, but was deceived in his lying there, the noise coming every moment of the growth of the fire, so we were forced to begin to pack up our own goods and prepare for their removal, and did by moonshine, it being brave, dry, and moonshine, and warm weather, carry much of my goods into the garden, and Mr. Hayter and I did remove my money and iron chests into my cellar, as thinking that the safest place, and got my bags of gold into my office ready to carry away, and my chief papers of accounts also there, and my tallies into a box by themselves. The 3rd. About 4 o'clock in the morning, my Lady Batten sent me a cart to carry away all my money and plate and best things to Sir William Ryder's at Bethnal Green, which I did, riding myself in my nightgown in the cart. And Lord, to see how the streets and the highways are crowded with people running and riding and getting off carts to fetch away things. I find Sir William Ryder tired with being called up all night and receiving things from several friends. I am eased at my heart to have my treasure so well secured. Then home with much ado to find a way, nor any sleep all this night to me nor my poor wife. But then, and all this day, she and I and all my people labouring to get away the rest of our things, and did get Mr. Tooker to get me a lighter to take them in, and we did carry them, myself some, over Tower Hill, which was by this time full of people's goods, bringing their goods thither, and down to the lighter which lay at the next quay above the Tower dock. And there was my neighbour's wife, Mrs. Buckworth, with her pretty child and some few of her things, which I did willingly give way to be saved with mine. At night lay down a little upon a quilt of Will Hewer's in the office, all my own things being packed up or gone, and after me my poor wife did the like, we having fed upon the remains of yesterday's dinner, having no fire, nor dishes, nor any opportunity of preparing anything. The 4th. Up by break of day to get away the remainder of my things, which I did by a lighter at the iron gate, and my hands so few that it was the afternoon before we could get them all away. Sir William Batten, not knowing how to remove his wine, did dig a pit in the garden and laid it in there, and I took the opportunity of laying all the papers of my office that I could not otherwise dispose of. And in the evening Sir William Penn and I did dig another and put our wine in it, and I my Parmesan cheese, as well as my wine and some other things. This afternoon, sitting melancholy with Sir William Penn in our garden, and thinking of the certain burning of this office without extraordinary means, I did propose for the sending up of all our workmen from Woolwich and Deptford yards, none whereof yet appeared, and to write to Sir William Coventry to have the Duke of York's permission to pull down houses rather than lose this office, which would much hinder the King's business. So Sir William Penn he went down this night in order to the sending them up tomorrow morning, and I wrote to Sir William Coventry about the business, but received no answer. This night Mrs. Turner and her husband supped with my wife, and I at night in the office, upon a shoulder of mutton from the cook's, without any napkin or anything, in a sad manner, but were merry. Only now and then walking into the garden and saw how horridly the sky looks, all on fire in the night, was enough to put us out of our wits, and indeed it was extremely dreadful, for it looks just as if it was at us, and the whole heaven on fire. I after supper walked in the dark down to Tower Street, and there saw it all on fire at the Trinity House on that side, and the Dolphin Tavern on this side, which was very near us, and the fire with extraordinary vehemence. Now begins the practice of blowing up of houses in Tower Street, those next to the tower, which at first did frighten people more than anything, but it stopped the fire where it was done, it bringing down the houses to the ground in the same places they stood, and then it was easy to quench what little fire was in it. Will Hewer this day went to see how his mother did, and comes late home, but telling us how he hath been forced to remove her to Islington, her house in Pye Corner being burnt, so that it is got so far that way, and all the Old Bailey, and was running down to Fleet Street, and Paul's is burned, and all Cheapside. I wrote to my father this night, but the post-house being burned, the letter could not go. The 5th. I lay down in the office again upon Will Hewer's quilt, being mighty weary and sore in my feet with going till I was hardly able to stand. About 2 in the morning my wife calls me up and tells me of new cries of fire, it being come to Barking Church, which is the bottom of our lane. I up, and finding it so, resolved presently to take her away, and did, and took my gold, which was about £2,350, Will Hewer and Jane down by Poundy's boat to Woolwich. But, Lord, what a sad sight it was by moonlight to see the whole city almost on fire, that you might see it plain at Woolwich, as if you were by it. There, when I came, I find the gates shut, but no guard kept at all, which troubled me because of discourses now begun that there is a plot in it, and that the French had done it. I got the gates open, and to Mr. Sheldon's, where I locked up my gold and charged my wife and Will Hewer never to leave the room without one of them in it, night or day. So back again, by the way seeing my goods well in the lighters at Deptford, and watched well by people. Home, and whereas I expected to have seen our house on fire, it being now about 7 o'clock, it was not. But going to the fire, I find, by the blowing up of houses and the great help given by the workmen out of the King's Yards, sent up by Sir William Penn, there is a good stop given to it, as well at Mark Lane End as ours, it having only burned the dial of Barking Church and part of the porch, and was there quenched. I up to the top of Barking Steeple, and there saw the saddest sight of desolation that I ever saw. Everywhere great fires, oil cellars and brimstone and other things burning. I became afeard to stay there long, and therefore down again as fast as I could, the fire being spread as far as I could see it, and to Sir William Penn's, and there eat a piece of cold meat, having eaten nothing since Sunday but the remains of Sunday's dinner. Here I met with Mr. Young and Mr. Whistler, and having removed all my things, and received good hopes that the fire at our end is stopped, they and I walked into the town, and find Fenchurch Street, Gracious Street, and Lombard Street, all in dust. The Exchange a sad sight, nothing standing there of all the statues or pillars but Sir Thomas Gresham's picture in the corner. Walked out into Moorfields, our feet ready to burn, walking through the town among the hot coals, and find that full of people, and poor wretches carrying their goods there, and everybody keeping his goods together by themselves, and a great blessing it is to them that it is fair weather for them to keep abroad night and day. Thence homeward, having passed through Cheapside and Newgate Market, all burned, and seen Anthony Joyce's house in fire, and took up, which I keep by me, a piece of glass of Mercer's Chapel in the street, where much more was, so melted and buckled with the heat of the fire, like parchment. I also did see a poor cat taken out of a hole in the chimney joining to the wall of the Exchange, with the hair all burned off the body, and yet alive. So home at night, and find there good hopes of saving our office, but great endeavours of watching all night and having men ready. And so we lodged them in the office, and had drink and bread and cheese for them. And I lay down and slept a good night about midnight, though when I rose, I hear that there had been a great alarm of French and Dutch being risen, which proved nothing. But it is a strange thing to see how long this time did look since Sunday, having been always full of a variety of actions, and little sleep, and I had forgot almost the day of the week. The 6th. Up about 5 o'clock, and there met Mr. Gordon at the gate of the office, to call our men to Bishopsgate, where no fire had yet been near, and there is now one broken out, which did give great grounds to people, and to me too, to think that there is some kind of plot in this, on which many by this time have been taken, and it hath been dangerous for any stranger to walk in the streets. But I went with the men, and we did put it out in a little time, and now, all being pretty well, I took boat and over to Southwark, and took boat on the other side of the bridge, and so to Westminster, thinking to shift myself, being all in dirt from top to bottom, but could not there find any place to buy a shirt or a pair of gloves, Westminster Hall being full of people's goods, those in Westminster having removed all their goods, and the exchequer money put into vessels to carry to none-such. But to the Swan, and there was trimmed, and then to Whitehall, but saw nobody, and so home. A sad sight to see how the river looks. No houses nor church near it to the temple where it stopped. At home did go with Sir William Batten and our neighbour Knightley to Sir Richard Ford's, and there dined, in an earthen platter, a fried breast of mutton, a great many of us, but very merry, and indeed as good a meal, though as ugly a one, as ever I had in my life. Thence down to Deptford, and there with great satisfaction landed all my goods at Sir George Carteret's, safe, and nothing missed I could see or hurt. This being done to my great content, I home, and to Sir William Batten's, and there supped well, and mighty merry, and our fears over. From them to the office, and there slept, with the office full of labourers, who talked and slept and walked all night long there. But strange it was to see Clothworkers' Hall on fire these 3 days and nights in one body of flame, it being the cellar full of oil. The 7th. Up by 5 o'clock, and blessed be God, find all well, and by water to Paul's Wharf. Walked thence, and saw all the town burned, and a miserable sight of Paul's Church, with all the roofs fallen, and the body of the choir fallen into St. Faith's. Paul's School also, Ludgate, Fleet Street, my father's house, and the church, and a good part of the temple, the like. So to Creed's lodging near the New Exchange, and there find him laid down upon a bed, the house all unfurnished, there being fears of the fires coming to them. There borrowed a shirt of him, and washed. To Sir William Coventry at St. James's, who lay without curtains, having removed all his goods, as the King at Whitehall and everybody had done and was doing. So home, and did give order for my house to be made clean, and then down to Woolwich, and there find all well. Dined, and then home, and spent the evening with Sir Richard Ford, Mr. Knightley, and Sir William Penn at Sir William Batten's. Sir William Penn did give me a bed, but without curtains or hangings, all being down. So here I went the first time into a naked bed, only my drawers on, and did sleep pretty well. But still, both sleeping and waking, had a fear of fire in my heart, that I took little rest. The 8th. Up, and with Sir William Batten and Sir William Penn by water to Whitehall and St. James's, where we met first at Sir William Coventry's chamber, and there did what business we can without any books. The fleet is at Portsmouth, there staying a wind to carry them to the Downs or towards Bullen, where they say the Dutch fleet is gone and stays. Thence with Sir William Batten to the Cockpit, whither the Duke of Albemarle is come. It seems the King holds him so necessary at this time, that he hath sent for him, and will keep him here. Sir William Batten and I home, were met by my brother John, come to town to see how things are with us. The 9th, Sunday. Take leave of my brother, whom I sent back this afternoon, though rainy, which it hath not done a good while before. I had no room nor convenience for him here till my house is fitted, but I was very kind to him, and do take very well of him his journey. I did give him 40 shillings for his pocket. Anon to Sir William Penn to bed, and made my boy Tom to read me asleep. The 13th. Up and down to Tower Wharf, and there with Balty and labourers from Deptford did get my goods housed well at home. So down to Deptford again to fetch the rest. The 14th. Up and to work, having carpenters come to help in setting up bedsteads and hangings, and at that trade my people and I all the morning, till pressed by public business to leave them. I was troubled to see all my goods lie up and down the house in a bad condition, and strange workmen going to and fro might take what they would almost. All the afternoon busy, and Sir William Coventry came to me, and there discoursed about getting an account ready against the Parliament, and thereby did create me infinite of business, and to be done on a sudden, which troubled me. But however, he being gone, I about it late to good purpose. And so home, having this day also got my wine out of the ground again, and set it in my cellar, but with great pain to keep the porters that carried it in from observing the money chests there. The 15th. All morning at the office, mighty busy about this account, at it till 11 at night, and it is strange to see how clear my head was, whereas one would think that I should have been dozed. I never did observe so much of myself in my life. Home to bed, and find, to my infinite joy, many rooms clean, and myself and wife lie in our own chamber again, but much terrified in the nights nowadays with dreams of fire and falling down of houses. The 17th. Up betimes, and shaved myself after a week's growth. But Lord, how ugly I was yesterday, and how fine today! By water, seeing the city all the way, a sad sight indeed, much fire being still in, to Sir William Coventry, and there read over my collection of the particulars of the excess of charge created by a war, with good content. The 22nd. Now my house is so clean as I never saw it, or any other house in my life, and everything in as good condition as ever before the fire, but with, I believe, about £20 cost one way or other, besides about £20 charge in removing my goods, and do not find that I have lost anything but 2 little pictures of shipping and sea, and a little gold frame for one of my sea cards. My glazier, indeed, is so full of work that I cannot get him to come to perfect my house. In the afternoon I paid for the 2 lighters that carried my goods to Deptford, and they cost me £8. The 28th. At night comes Sir William Penn, and he and I a turn in the garden, and he broke to me a proposition of his and my joining in a design of fetching timber from Scotland by the help of Mr. Pett, which, while London is building, will yield good money. I approve it.
(1667) June the 3rd. Up and by water to Deptford, it being Trinity Monday, when the master is chosen, and there find them just sat down, and so I dined with them, and we had a good dinner of plain meat, and a good company at our table, among others my good Mr. Eveling, with whom after dinner I stepped aside and talked upon the present posture of our affairs, which is, that the Dutch are known to be abroad with 80 sail of ships of war, and 20 fire ships, and the French come into the Channel with 20 sail of men of war, and 5 fire ships, while we have not a ship at sea to do them any hurt with, but are calling in all we can, while our ambassadors are treating at Breda, and the Dutch look upon them as come to beg peace, and use them accordingly. The 4th. Up and to the office, and there busy all the morning putting in order the answering of the letter sent to the office by the new commissioners of the Treasury, who demand an account from the King's coming in to this day, which we shall do in the best manner we can. The 8th. Up and to the office, where all the news this morning is that the Dutch are come with a fleet of 80 sail to Harwich, and that guns were heard plain by Sir William Ryder's people at Bethnal Green all yesterday noon. The King hath sent down my Lord of Oxford to raise the country there, and all the western barges are taken up to make a bridge over river about the Hope, for horse to cross the river if there be occasion. The 10th. Up and news brought us that the Dutch are come up as high as the Nore. William Batten, William Penn, and I to St. James's, where the Duke of York gone this morning betimes to send away some men down to Chatham. So we 3 to Whitehall and met Sir William Coventry, who presses all the possible for fire ships. So we 3 to the office presently, and thither comes Sir Francis Hollis, who is to command them all in some exploits he is to do with them on the enemy in the river. So we all down to Deptford, and pitch upon ships and set men at work. But Lord, to see how backwardly things move at this pinch, notwithstanding the enemies being now come up as high as almost the Hope. And so to Woolwich, to give order for the dispatch of a ship I have taken under my care to see dispatched, and orders being so given, I, under pretence to fetch up the ship which lay at Gray's, the Golden Hand, did do that in my way, and went down to Gravesend, where I find the Duke of Albemarle just come, with a great many idle lords and gentlemen with their pistols and fooleries, and the bulwark not able to have stood half an hour had they come up. But the Dutch are fallen down from the Hope and Shell Haven as low as the Sheerness, and we do plainly at this time hear the guns play. The 11th. Up and to the office, where Brunker came to us, who is just now going to Chatham upon a desire of Commissioner Petts, who is in a very fearful stink for fear of the Dutch, and desires help for God and King and kingdom's sake. So Brunker goes down, and Sir John Mennies also from Gravesend. This morning Pett writes us word that Sheerness is lost last night after 2 or 3 hours' dispute. The enemy hath possessed himself of the place, which is very sad, and puts us into great fears of Chatham. Sir William Batten and I down by water to Deptford, and there Sir William Penn and we did consider of several matters relating to the dispatch of the fire-ships. And so William Batten and I home again, and there to dinner, my wife and father having dined, and after dinner went to Mr. Fenn, and did get him to pay me above £400 of my wages, and Will Hewer received it for me, and brought it home this night. The 12th. Up very betimes to our business at the office, there hiring of more fire-ships, and at it close all the morning. At noon home, and met Sir William Coventry's boy, and there in his letter find that the Dutch had made no motion since their taking Sheerness, and the Duke of Albemarle writes that all is safe as to the great ships against any assault, the Boom and Chain being so fortified, which put my heart into great joy. When I came to Sir William Coventry's chamber, I find him abroad, but his clerk Powell doth tell me that ill news is come to court of the Dutch breaking the chain at Chatham, which struck me to the heart. And so home, where all our hearts do now ache, for the news is true, that the Dutch have broken the chain and burned our ships, and particularly the Royal Charles. Other particulars I know not, but most sad to be sure. And the truth is, I do fear that the whole kingdom is undone. So, having with much ado finished my business at the office, I home to consider with my father and wife of things, and then to supper and to bed, full of fear and fright. Hardly slept all night. The 13th. No sooner up but hear the sad news confirmed of the Royal Charles being taken by the enemy, which Pett should have carried up higher by our several orders, and deserves therefore to be hanged by not doing it, and of the burning of several other ships, and that another fleet is come up into the Hope. Upon which news the King and Duke of York have been below since 4 o'clock in the morning, to command the sinking of ships at Barking Creek and other places, to stop their coming up higher, which put me into such fear that I presently resolved of my father's and wife's going into the country. And at 2 hours' warning they did go by the coach this day, with about £1,300 in gold in their night bag. Pray God give them good passage, and good care to hide it when they come home. But my heart is full of fear. They gone, I continued in frights and fear what to do with the rest. Will Hewer hath been at the bankers, and hath got £500 out of Backwell's hands of his own money, but they are so called upon that they will be all broke, hundreds coming to them for money, and their answer is, it is payable at 20 days, when the days are out we will pay you. And those that are not so, they make tell over their money, and make their bags false on purpose to give cause to retell it, and so spend time. I cannot have my 200 pieces of gold again for silver, all being bought up last night that were to be had, and sold for 24 and 25 shillings apiece. So I must keep the silver by me, which sometimes I think to fling into the house of office, and then again know not how I shall come by it if we be made to leave. I did about noon resolve to send Mr. Gibson away after my wife with another 1,000 pieces, under colour of an express to Sir Jeremy Smith, who is, as I hear, with some ships at Newcastle, which I did really send to him, and may possibly prove of good use to the King. For it is possible, in the hurry of business, that they may not think of it at court, and the charge of express is not considerable to the King. So, though I intend Gibson to go no further than to Huntington, yet I direct him to send the packet forward. My business most of the afternoon is listening to everybody that comes to the office. What news, which is variously related, some better, some worse, but nothing certain. I also sent, my mind being in pain, Saunders after my wife and father, to overtake them at their night's lodging, to see how matters go with them. In the evening I sent for my cousin Sarah and her husband, who came, and I did deliver them my chest of writings about Brampton, and my late brother Tom's papers, and my journals, which I value much, and did send my 2 silver flagons to Kate Joyce's, that so, being scattered what I have, something might be saved. I have also made a girdle, by which with some trouble I do carry 300 pounds in gold about my body, that I may not be without something in case I should be surprised. Late at night comes Mr. Hudson, my neighbour, and tells me that he came from Chatham this evening at 5 o'clock, and saw this afternoon the Royal James, Oak, and London burnt by the enemy with their fireships, that 2 or 3 men of war came up with them, and made no more of Upnor Castle shooting than of a fly. I made my will this day, and did give all I had equally between my father and wife, and left copies of it in each of Mr. Hayter and Will Hewer's hands, who both witnessed the will. The 14th. Several seamen came this morning to me to tell me that if I would get their pay tickets paid, they would go and do all they could against the Dutch. But otherwise they would not venture being killed and lose all they have already fought for, so that I was forced to try what I could do to get them paid. We have not one word yet from Brunker, or Peter Pett, or John Mennies, of anything at Chatham. I am left alone here at the office, and the truth is, I am glad my station is to be here, near my own home and out of danger, yet in a place of doing the King good service. I have this morning good news from Gibson, 3 letters from 3 several stages, that he was safe last night as far as Royston at between 9 and 10 at night. This evening to William Batten's to sit and talk a little, and then home to my flageolet, my heart being at pretty good ease by a letter from my wife, brought by Saunders, that my father and wife got well last night to their inn, and out again this morning. No news today of any motion of the enemy, either upwards towards Chatham or this way. The 15th. At night comes, unexpectedly so soon, Mr. Gibson, who left my wife well, and who, which I was afeard of and cannot blame him, but must myself be wiser against another time, had one of his bags broke through his breeches, and some pieces dropped out, not many, he thinks, but 2, for he did alight and took them up, and went back and could find no more, but I am not able to tell how many, which troubles me. But the joy of having the greatest part safe there makes me bear with it. The 18th. To the office, and by word was brought me that Commissioner Pett is brought to the Tower, and there laid up close prisoner, which puts me into a fright, lest they may do the same with us as they do with him. The 19th. At noon comes an order from Sir Richard Browne, commanding me this afternoon to attend the Council Board with all my books and papers touching the Medway, and so took coach into the Council Chamber lobby, where I am called into a large committee of the Council, present the Duke of Albemarle, Anglesey, Arlington, Ashley, Carteret, Duncombe, Coventry, Ingram, Clifford, Lauderdale, Morris, Manchester, Craven, Carlisle, Bridgewater. And after Sir William Coventry's telling them what orders His Royal Highness had made for the safety of the Medway, I told them what we had done, and showed them our letters. Then was Peter Pett called in with the Lieutenant of the Tower. He is in his old clothes and looked most sillily. His charge was chiefly the not carrying up of the great ships, and the using of the boats in carrying away his goods, in which he answered very sillily, though his faults to me seem only great omissions. After having heard him for an hour or more, they bid him withdraw, I all this while showing him no respect, but rather against him, for which God forgive me, for I mean no hurt to him, but only find that these lords are upon their own purgation, and it is necessary I should be so in behalf of the office. So I away back with my books and papers, and when I got into the court, it was pretty to see how people gazed upon me, so that I thought myself obliged to salute people and to smile, lest they should think I was a prisoner too. I got home, and I and my wife to talk, who did give me so bad an account of her and my father's method in burying of our gold, that made me mad. My father and she did it on Sunday, in open daylight, in the midst of the garden, where for aught they knew many eyes might see them, which put me into such trouble that I was almost mad about it. Such was my trouble at this that I fell out with my wife, that though new come to town, I did not sup with her nor speak to her tonight, but to bed and sleep. The 27th. Wakened this morning about 3 o'clock by Mr. Griffin with a letter from Sir William Coventry to William Penn, which William Penn sent me to see, that the Dutch are come up to the Nore again, and he knows not whether further or no, and would have therefore several things done, ships sunk, and I know not what. I tried, and with much ado did get a little sleep more, and so up about 6 o'clock, full of thought what to do with the little money I have left, and my plate, wishing with all my heart that that was all secured. So to the office, where much business all the morning, and the more by my brethren being all out of the way. Sir William Penn this night taken so ill, cannot stir, William Batten ill at Walthamstow, Sir John Mennies the like at Chatham, and my Lord Brunker there also upon business. The 28th. We hear that the Dutch are gone down again, and thanks be to God, the trouble they give us this second time is not very considerable. July the 3rd. By water to Whitehall. Here I find all the news is the enemy's landing 3,000 men near Harwich, and attacking Langner Fort, and being beat off thence with our great guns, killing some of their men, and they leaving their lathers behind them. But we had no horse in the way on Suffolk side, otherwise we might have galled their foot. The Duke of York is gone down thither this day, while the General sat sleeping this afternoon at the council table. After a deal of this bibble-babble, I to Mrs. Martin's, but when I came, contrary to my expectation, I find her all in trouble, and what was it for, but that I have got her with child, and she is in exceeding grief, and swears that the child is mine, which I do not believe, but yet it doth trouble me not a little. The 6th. Up and to the office, where some of us sat busy all the morning. At noon home to dinner, whither Creed came to dine with us, and brings the first word I hear of the news of a peace, the King having letters come to him this noon, signifying that it is concluded on. After dinner, away by coach to Westminster, where to the Swan and drank, and then to Mrs. Martin's, where I met with the good news, que esta no es con child, she having de estos upon her. My joy in this made me send for wine, and thither came her sister and Mrs. Cragg, and I stayed a good while there. October the 4th. Sir William Batten fell sick yesterday morning. Word is brought me that he is so ill that it is believed he cannot live till tomorrow, which troubles me mightily, partly out of kindness, he being a good neighbour, and partly because of the money he owes me. The 5th. Sir William Batten died this morning, having been but 2 days sick. Sir William Penn and I did dispatch a letter this morning to Sir William Coventry to recommend Colonel Middleton, whom we think a most honest and understanding man, and fit for that place. The 6th, Lord's Day. Up and dressed myself, and so walked out with the boy to Smithfield, to Cow Lane, to Lincoln's, and there spoke with him and agreed upon the hour tomorrow to set out towards Brampton. The 7th. Up betimes, and about 9 o'clock, I and my wife and Willett set out in a coach with 4 horses, and Will Hewer and Murford rode by us on horseback. Before night did come to Bishop Stafford, where stayed at the Reindeer. The 8th. Up pretty betimes, and away to Cambridge, it being foul, rainy weather, and there did take up at the Rose. After supper to cards, and then to bed, lying I in one bed, and my wife and girl in another in the same room, and very merry, we talking together, and mightily pleased both of us with the girl. The 9th. Up and away for Huntingdon, mightily pleased all along the road to remember old stories, and came to Brampton at about noon, and there find my father and sister and brother all well, and here laid up our things, and up and down to see the garden with my father, and the house, and do altogether find it very pretty, especially the little parlour and the summer houses in the garden, and I bless God that I am like to have such a pretty place to retire to. Mr. Shepley stayed with us and supped, and full of good country discourse, and when supper done took his leave, and we all to bed, my wife and I in the high bed in our chamber, and Willett in the trundle bed, which she desired to lie in by us. The 10th and the 11th. Waked in the morning with great pain, I, of the colic, by cold taken yesterday, but with rubbing my belly, keeping of it warm, I did at last come to some ease, and rose, and up to walk up and down the garden with my father, to talk about a husband for my sister, whereof there is at present no appearance. but we must endeavour to find her one now, for she grows old and ugly. Thence all of us, my sister and brother and Will Hewer, to dinner to Hinchingbrook, where we had a good plain country dinner, but most kindly used. Here I spent alone with my lady after dinner the most of the afternoon, and anon the 2 twins were sent for from school to come to see me, and I took them into the garden, and there in one of the summer houses did examine them, and do find them so well advanced in their learning that I was amazed at it. Then into my lady again, and stayed till it was almost night again, and then took leave with extraordinary kindness from my lady, who looks upon me like one of her own family and interest. So thence my wife and people by the highway, and I walked over the park with Mr. Shepley to my father's, and there sat and drank and talked a little, and then parted, and he being gone, and what company there was, my father and I with a dark lantern, it being now night, into the garden with my wife, and there went about our great work to dig up my gold. But Lord, what a toss I was for some time in, that they could not justly tell where it was, so that I began heartily to sweat and be angry that they could not agree better upon the place, and at last to fear that it was gone. But by and by, poking with a spit, we found it, and then began with a spud to lift up the ground. But good God, to see how sillily they did it! Not half a foot underground, and in the sight of the world from 100 places, if anybody by accident were near at hand, and within sight of a neighbour's window, and their hearing also being close by. Only my father says that he saw them all gone to church before he began the work when he laid the money, but that doth not excuse it to me. But I was out of my wits almost, and the more from that upon my lifting up the earth with a spud, I did discern that I scattered the pieces of gold round about the ground among the grass and loose earth. And taking up the iron head pieces wherein they were put, I perceived the earth was got among the gold, and wet, so that the bags were all rotten, and all the notes, so that I could not tell what in the world to say to it, not knowing how to judge what was wanting, or what had been lost by Gibson in his coming down, which, all put together, did make me mad, and at last was forced to take up the head pieces, dirt and all, and as many of the scattered pieces as I could with the dirt discern by candlelight, and carry them up into my brother's chamber, and there lock them up till I had eat a little supper. And then, all people going to bed, Will Hewer and I did all alone, with several pails of water and basins, at last wash the dirt off of the pieces, and parted the pieces from the dirt, and then begun to tell, and by a note which I had of the value of the whole, do find that there was short above 100 pieces, which did make me mad, and considering that the neighbour's house was so near, that we could not suppose we could speak to one another in the garden at the place where the gold lay, especially by my father being deaf. But they must know what we'd been doing. I feared that they might in the night come and gather some pieces and prevent us the next morning. So Will Hewer and I out again about midnight, and there by candlelight did make shift to gather 45 pieces more, and so in and to cleanse them, and by this time it was past 2 in the morning, and so to bed, and I lay in the trundle bed, the girl being gone to bed to my wife, and there lay in some disquiet all night, telling of the clock till it was daylight, and then rose and called Will Hewer, and he and I, with pails and a sieve, did lock ourselves into the garden, and there gather all the earth about the place into pails, and then sieve those pails in one of the summer houses, just as they do for diamonds in other parts of the world, and there, to our great content, did, with much trouble, by 9 o'clock, make the last night's 45 up to 79, so that we are come to about 20 or 30 of what I think the true number should be, and perhaps within less, and of them I may reasonably think that Mr. Gibson might lose some, so that I am pretty well satisfied that my loss is not great, and do bless God that it is so well, and do leave my father to make a second examination of the dirt, which he promises he will do, and poor man is mightily troubled for this accident. But I declared myself very well satisfied, and so indeed I am, and my mind at rest on it, and gives me some kind of content to remember how painful it is sometimes to keep money as well as to get it. And so got all my gold put up in bags, and so having the last night writ to my Lady Sandwich to lend me John Bowles to go along with me on my journey, not telling her the reason, but it was only to secure my gold, we to breakfast, and then about 10 o'clock took coach, my wife and I, and Willett, and Will Hewer, and Murford, and Bowles, whom my lady lent me, and my brother John on horseback, and with these 4 I thought myself pretty safe. My gold I put into a basket and set under one of the seats, and so my work every quarter of an hour was to look to see whether all was well, and did ride in great fear all the day. But it was a pleasant day, and good company, and I mightily contented. And at Stevenage we came well before night, and all safe. And there, with great care, I got the gold up to the chamber, my wife carrying one bag, and the girl another, and Will Hewer the rest in the basket, and set it all under a bed in our chamber. The 12th. Up and eat our breakfast, and set out about 9 o'clock, and by 5 o'clock got home, where I find all well, and did bring my gold to my heart's content very safe home, having not this day carried it in a basket, but in our hands. The girl took care of one, and my wife another bag, and I the rest, I being afeard of the bottom of the coach, lest it should break. At home I do find that Sir William Batten's burial was today. (1668) February the 5th. Up, and I to Captain Cox, where he and I did discourse of our business that we are to go about to the Commissioners of Accounts, about our prizes. And having resolved to conceal nothing, but confess the truth being likely to do us most good, we parted, and I to Whitehall, to the Commissioners of Accounts, where I was forced to stay 2 hours, I believe, before I was called in, and when came in, did take an oath to declare the truth to what they should ask me. And so they fell to inquire about the business of prize goods, wherein I did answer them as well as I could answer them, to everything the just truth. I do perceive at last that they did lay most like a fault to me was that I did buy goods upon my Lord Sandwich's declaring that it was with the King's allowance, and my believing it without seeing the King's allowance, which is a thing I will own, and doubt not to justify myself in. I think that it can do me no hurt, at the worst no more than to make me refund what profit I did make of my agreement with Captain Cock. And yet, though this be all, yet I do find so poor a spirit within me that it makes me almost out of my wits, so that I am ashamed of myself to myself, and do fear what would become of me if any real affliction should come upon me. The 12th. Up and to my office, where all the morning drawing up my narrative of my proceedings and concernments in the buying of prize goods, which I am to present to the Committee for Accounts. At noon home to dinner, and after dinner I had to find my cousin Roger, which I did at the Parliament House, where I met him and Sir Thomas Crew and Mr. George Montague, who are mighty busy how to save my Lord's name from being in the report for anything which the Committee is commanded to report to the House of the miscarriages of the late war. I find they drive furiously still in the business of tickets, which is nonsense in itself, and cannot come to anything. Thence with cousin Roger to his lodgings, and there sealed the writings with Jackson about my sister's marriage. The 17th. Up and to the office, where all the morning till noon getting some things more ready against the afternoon for the Committee of Accounts, which did give me great trouble to see how I am forced to dance after them in one place, and to answer committees of Parliament in another. The 18th. To Westminster Hall, and there walked all the morning, and did speak with several Parliament men. Here I did get a copy of the report itself about our paying off men by tickets, and am mightily glad to see it now, knowing the state of our case and what we have to answer to. The 27th. All the morning at the office, and at noon home to dinner, and thence with my wife and Deb to the King's house to see Virgin Martyr, the first time it hath been acted a great while, and is mighty pleasant. But that which did please me beyond anything in the whole world was the wind music when the angel comes down, which is so sweet that it ravished me, and indeed in a word did wrap up my soul so that it made me really sick, just as I have formerly been when in love with my wife, that neither then, nor all the evening going home and at home, I was able to think of anything, but remained all night transported, so as I could not believe that ever any music hath that real command over the soul of a man, as this did upon me. The 28th. While we were with the Duke of York, comes in Mr. Wren from the house, where he tells us another storm hath been all this day almost, against the officers of the Navy Office upon this complaint, that though they have made good rules for payments of tickets, yet they have not observed them themselves, which was driven so high as to have it urged that we should presently be put out of our places, and so they have at last ordered that we be heard at the bar of the house upon this business on Thursday next. March 4th and 5th. Fell to my work at the office, shutting the doors that we, I and my clerks, might not be interrupted. And so, only with room for a little dinner, we very busy all the day till night, that the officers met for me to give them the heads of what I intended to say, which I did, with great discontent to see them all rely on me that have no reason at all to trouble myself about it, nor have any thanks from them for my labour. This troubled me so much, as together with the shortness of the time and muchness of the business, did let me be at it till about 10 at night, and then, quite weary and dull and vexed, I could go no further, but resolved to leave the rest to tomorrow morning, and so did give over, and went home, without supper, vexed and sickish, to bed, and there slept about 3 hours, but then waked, and never in so much trouble of mind in all my life, thinking of the task I have upon me, and upon what dissatisfactory grounds, and what the issue of it may be to me. With these thoughts I lay troubling myself till 6 o'clock, restless, and at last getting my wife to talk to me to comfort me, which she did, and made me resolve to quit my hands of this office, and endure the trouble of it no longer than till I can clear myself of it. So, with great trouble, but yet with some ease from this discourse with my wife, I up and to my office, whither came my clerks, and so I did huddle up the best I could some more notes for my discourse today, and by 9 o'clock was ready, and did go down to the Old Swan, and there by boat, with Tom Hayter and Will Hewer, to Westminster, where I found myself come time enough, and my brethren all ready. And to comfort myself did go to the Dog and drink half a pint of mulled sack, and in the hall did drink a dram of brandy at Mrs. Howlett's, and with the warmth of this did find myself in better order as to courage truly. So we all up to the lobby, and between 11 and 12 o'clock were called in, with the mace before us, into the house, where a mighty full house, and we stood at the bar, viz. Brunker, Sir John Mennies, Sir Thomas Harvey, and myself, William Penn being in the house as a member. I perceived the whole house was full, and full of expectation of our defence, what it would be, and with great prejudice. After the Speaker had told us the dissatisfaction of the House, and read the report of the committee, I began our defence most acceptably and smoothly, and continued at it without any hesitation or loss, but with full scope and all my reason free about me, as if it had been at my own table, from that time till past 3 in the afternoon, and so ended without any interruption from the Speaker, but we withdrew. And there all my fellow officers, and all the world that was within hearing, did congratulate me, and cry up my speech as the best thing they ever heard, and my fellow officers overjoyed in it. We were called in again by and by to answer only one question, touching our paying tickets to ticket-mongers, and so, with our hearts mightily overjoyed at this success, we all to dinner to Lord Brunker. The 6th. Up betimes, and with Sir Dennis Gordon to Sir William Coventry's chamber, where the first word he said to me was, "Good morrow, Mr. Pepys, that must be Speaker of the Parliament House," and did protest I had got honour for ever in Parliament. He said that his brother that sat by him admires me, and another gentleman said that I could not get less than £1,000 a year if I would put on a gown and plead at the Chancery Bar. But what pleases me most, he tells me that the Solicitor General did protest that he thought I spoke the best of any man in England. After several talks with him alone touching his own businesses, he carried me to Whitehall, and there parted, and I to the Duke of York's lodging, and find him going to the park, it being a very fine morning, and I after him, and as soon as he saw me, he told me with great satisfaction that I had converted a great many yesterday, and did with great praise of me go on with the discourse with me. And by overtaking the King and Duke of York came to me both, and he said, "Mr. Pepys, I am very glad of your success yesterday," and fell to talk of my well speaking, and many of the lords there, and my Lord Berkeley, did cry me up for what they had heard of it, and others, Parliament men there about the King, did say that they never heard such a speech in their lives delivered in that manner. Everybody that saw me almost came to me, as Joseph Williamson and others, with such eulogy as cannot be expressed. From thence I went to Westminster Hall, where I met Mr. George Montague, who came to me and kissed me, and told me that he had often heretofore kissed my hands, but now he would kiss my lips, protesting that I was another Cicero, and said all the world said the same of me. Mr. Ashburnham, and every creature I met there of the Parliament, or that knew anything of the Parliament's actings, did salute me with this honour. Mr. Godolphin, Mr. Sands, who swore he would go 20 miles at any time to hear the like again, and that he never saw so many sit 4 hours together to hear any man in his life as there did to hear me. Mr. Chichley, Sir John Duncombe, and everybody doth say that the kingdom will ring of my ability, and that I have done myself right for my whole life. And so Captain Cock and other of my friends say that no man had ever such opportunity of making his abilities known. And, that I may cite all at once, Mr. Lieutenant of the Tower did tell me that Mr. Vaughan did protest to him, and in his hearing said so to the Duke of Albemarle, and afterwards to William Coventry, that he had sat 26 years in Parliament, and never heard such a speech there before. For which the Lord God make me thankful, and that I may make use of it not to pride and vain glory, but that now I have this esteem, I may do nothing that may lessen it. The 31st. At dinner comes a summons for this office to attend a committee of Parliament this afternoon with Sir Dennis Gordon, which I accordingly did, with my papers relating to the sending of victuals to Sir John Harmon's fleet, and there, Sir Robert Brooks in the chair, we did give them a full account. Having given them good satisfaction, I took coach, and away to Unthanks, and there took up my wife and Deb, and went round the park, and so with pleasure home, where I called Deb to take pen, ink, and paper, and write down what things came into my head for my wife to do, in order to her going into the country. And the girl, writing not so well as she would do, cried, and her mistress construed it to be sullenness, and so was angry, and I seemed angry with her too. But going to bed, she undressed me, and there I did give her good advice, and Bessela ea weeping still, and yo did take her, the first time in my life, sobra mi genou, and did poner mi mano sub her jupe, and toca su thigh, which did ezer me great pleasure, and so did no more, but besando la went to my bed. (1669) May the 1st. Up betimes, called up by my tailor, and there first put on a summer suit this year. But it was not my fine one of flowered tabby vest and coloured camelot tunic, because it was too fine with the gold lace at the hands, that I was afeard to be seen in it. But put on the stuff suit I made the last year, which is now repaired, and so did go to the office in it, and sat all the morning, the day looking as if it would be fouled. At noon home to dinner, and there find my wife extraordinary fine with her flowered tabby gown that she made 2 years ago, now laced exceeding pretty, and indeed was fine all over, and mighty earnest to go, though the day was very lowering, and she would have me put on my fine suit, which I did. And so anon we went alone through the town with our new liveries of serge, and the horses' manes and tails tied with red ribbon, and the standards thus gilt with varnish, and all clean, and green reins, that people did mightily look upon us. And the truth is, I did not see any coach more pretty or more gay than ours all the day. But we set out of humour, I because Betty, whom I expected, was not come to go with us, and my wife, that I would sit on the same seat with her, which she liked not, being so fine. And then expected to meet Shears, which we did in the Pall Mall, and against my will I was forced to take him into the coach, but was sullen all day almost, and little complaisant, the day also being unpleasing, though the park full of coaches, but dusty and windy and cold, and now and then a little dribbling rain. And what made it worst, there were so many hackney coaches as spoiled the sight of the gentlemen's, and so we had little pleasure. But here was William Bertellier and his sister in a borrowed coach by themselves, and I took them and we to the lodge, and at the door did give them a sullabub and other things, cost me 12 shillings, and pretty merry. And so back to the coaches, and there till the evening. And then home, leaving Mr. Shears at St. James's Gate, where he took leave of us for altogether, he being this night to set out for Portsmouth Post on his way to Tangier, which troubled my wife mightily, who is mightily, though not, I think, too fond of him. But she was out of humour all the evening, and I vexed at her for it, and she did not rest almost all the night, so as in the night I was forced to take her and hug her to put her to rest. The 4th, up and to the office, and then my wife being gone with the coach to see her mother at Deptford, I, before the office sat, went to the excise office, and thence, being alone, stepped into Duck Lane, and thence tried to have sent a porter to Deb's, but durst not trust him. And therefore, having bought a book to satisfy the bookseller for my stay there, a 12-penny book, Andronicus, of Tom Fuller, I took coach, and at the end of Jewin Street, next Red Cross Street, I sent the coachman to her lodging, and understand she has gone to Greenwich to one Mary's, a tanner's, at which I was glad, hoping to have opportunity to find her out there. And so, in great fear of being seen, I to the office, and there all morning. Dined at home, and presently after dinner comes home my wife, whom I believe was jealous of my spending the day, and I had very good fortune in being at home, for if Deb had been found, it is 40 to 1 I had been abroad. God forgive me. The 5th. At noon with Sir Thomas Allen and Sir Edward Scott and Lord Carlingford to the Spanish ambassadors, where I dined the first time. There was at the table himself and a Spanish countess, a good, comely, and witty lady, 3 fathers, and us. Discourse good and pleasant, and here was an Oxford scholar in a Doctor of Law's gown. This man, though a gentle sort of scholar, yet sat like a fool for want of French or Spanish, but only Latin, which he spoke like an Englishman to one of the fathers, and by he and I to talk, and the company very merry at my defending Cambridge against Oxford, and I made much use of my French and Spanish here to my great content. Thence home, where my wife troubled at my being abroad, so I to the office, and there till night, and then to her, so to supper, and I to bed. The 8th. All the afternoon within with Mr. Hayter, Gibson, and Will Hewer, reading over and drawing up new things in the instructions of commanders, which will be good, and I hope to get them confirmed by the Duke of York, though I perceive nothing will effectually perfect them, but to look over the whole body of the instructions of all the officers of a ship, and make them all perfect together. The 10th. Troubled, about 3 in the morning, with my wife's calling her maid up, and rising herself to go with her coach abroad to gather maydew, which she did, and I troubled for it, for fear of any hurt going abroad so betimes happening to her. But I to sleep again, and she came home about 6, and to bed again, all well. And I up, and with Mr. Gibson by coach to St. James, and thence to Whitehall. Thence walked my boy Jack with me to my Lord Crewe, and there dined with him. A stranger, a country gentleman, was with him, and he pleased with my discourse accidentally about the decay of gentlemen's families in the country, telling us that the old rule was that a family might remain 50 miles from London 100 year, 100 mile off from London 200 years, and so, farther or nearer London, more or less years. He also told us that he hath heard his father say that in his time it was so rare for a country gentleman to come to London, that when he did come, he used to make his will before he set out. The 12th. After dinner my wife and I to the Duke of York's playhouse, and there in the side balcony over against the music did hear, but not see, a new play, the first day acted, The Roman Virgin. An old play, and but ordinary, I thought, but the trouble of my eyes with the light of the candles did almost kill me. Thence home in our coach, and there find my brother John come to town, from Ellington, where among other things he tells me that my sister is with child and far gone, which I know not whether it did more trouble or please me, having no great care for my friends to have children, though I love other people's. The 14th. At noon to dinner with Mr. Wren to Lambeth with the Archbishop of Canterbury, the first time I was ever there, and I have long longed for it, where a noble house, and well furnished with good pictures and furniture, and noble attendants in good order, and a great deal of company, and the bishop mighty kind to me, particularly desiring my company another time when less company there. So home, and then my wife and I by water with my brother, as high as Fulham, talking and singing and playing the rogue with the western bargemen about the women of Woolwich, which mads them, and so back home to supper and to bed. The 16th, Lord's Day. My wife and I at church, our pew filled, which vexed me at her confidence, with Mrs. Backwell and 6 more that she brought with her. Dined at home, and William Bertellier with us, and I all the afternoon drawing up a foul draft of my petition to the Duke of York about my eyes, for leave to spend 3 or 4 months out of the office, drawing it so as to give occasion to a voyage abroad, which I did to my pretty good liking. The 19th. With my coach to St. James, and there finding the Duke of York gone to muster his men in Hyde Park, I alone with my boy thither, and there saw more, walking out of my coach as other gentlemen did, of a soldier's trade than ever I did in my life, the men being mighty fine, and their commanders, particularly the Duke of Monmouth. But methought their trade but very easy as to the mustering of their men, and the men but indifferently ready to perform what was commanded in the handling their arms. Here news was first talked of Harry Killigrew's being wounded in 9 places last night by footmen in the highway, going from the park in a hackney coach towards Hammersmith to his house at Turnham Green, they being supposed to be my Lady Shrewsbury's men, she being by in her coach with 6 horses, upon an old grudge of his saying openly that he had lain with her. Thence by and by to Whitehall, and there I waited upon the King and Queen all dinner-time in the Queen's lodgings, she being in her white pinner and apron, like a woman with child, and she seemed handsomer, plain so than dressed. And by dinner done, I out and to walk in the gallery for the Duke of York's coming out, and there meeting Mr. May, he took me down about 4 o'clock to Mr. Chevin's lodgings, and all alone did get me a dish of cold chickens and good wine, and I dined like a prince, being before very hungry and empty. By and by the Duke of York comes, and readily took me to his closet and received my petition, and discoursed it about my eyes, and pitied me, and with much kindness did give me his consent to be absent, and approved of my proposition to go into Holland to observe things there of the navy, but would first ask the King's leave, which he anon did, and that the King would be a good master to me. These were his words about my eyes, and doth like of my going into Holland, but doth advise that nobody should know of my going thither, but pretend that I did go into the country somewhither, which I liked well. Glad of this, I home, and thence took out my wife, and to Mr. Holliard's about a swelling in her cheek, but he not at home, and so round by Islington, and eat and drink, and so home, and after supper, to bed. The 24th. To Whitehall, where I attended the Duke of York, and was by him led to the King, who expressed great sense of my misfortune in my eyes, and concernment for their recovery, and accordingly signified not only his assent to my desire therein, but commanded me to give them rest this summer. The 29th, the King's birthday. To Whitehall, where all very gay, and particularly the Prince of Tuscany very fine, and is the first day of his appearing out of mourning since he came. I heard the Bishop of Peterborough preach, but dully, but a good anthem of Pelham's. Home to dinner, and then with my wife to Hyde Park, where all the evening great store of company, and great preparations by the Prince of Tuscany to celebrate the night with fireworks for the King's birthday, and so home. The 30th, Whit Sunday. By water to Whitehall, and thence to Sir William Coventry, where all the morning by his bedside, he being indisposed, our discourse was upon the notes I had lately prepared for Commander's instructions, but concluded that nothing will render them effectual without an amendment in the choice of them, that they be seamen, and not gentlemen above the command of the Admiral, by the greatness of their relations at court. Thence to the Duke of York, who, with the officers of the navy, made a good entrance on my draft of my new instructions to commanders, as well as expressing his general views of a reformation among them, as liking of my humble offers towards it. The 31st, up very betimes, and so continued all the morning, with Will Hewer upon examining and stating my accounts, in order to the fitting of myself to go abroad beyond sea. Dined at home, and in the afternoon by water to Whitehall, calling by the way at Mitchell's, where I have not been many a day till just the other day, and now I met her mother there, and knew her husband to be out of town, and here yo did besar ella, but have not opportunity para hacer mas with her, as I would have offered if yo had had it. and thence had another meeting with the Duke of York at Whitehall on yesterday's work, and made a good advance. And so being called by my wife, we to the park, Mary Batelier and a Dutch gentleman, a friend of hers, being with us. Thence to the World's End, a drinking house by the park, and there merry, and so home late. And thus ends all that I doubt I shall ever be able to do with my own eyes in the keeping of my journal, I being not able to do it any longer, having done now so long as to undo my eyes almost every time that I take a pen in my hand. And therefore, whatever comes of it, I must forbear, and therefore resolve from this time forward to have it kept by my people in longhand, and must therefore be contented to set down no more than is fit for them and all the world to know. Or if there be anything, which cannot be much now my amours to Deb are past, and my eyes hindering me in almost all other pleasures, I must endeavour to keep a margin in my book open, to add here and there a note in shorthand with my own hand. And so I betake myself that course which is almost as much as to see myself go into my grave, for which, and all the discomforts that will accompany my being blind, the good God prepare me. May the 31st, 1669, Samuel Pepys.